Okay, here we are, part three, the home stretch. Part three, we're going to be talking about sleep. So typically when we're talking about sleep, and typically if we don't get enough, we're going to have issues like feeling lousy at work, we're going to have difficulty concentrating, headaches are also frequent, irritability towards ourselves, our coworkers, and our friends, also family members. You're going to notice that you feel unrefreshed upon waking every single morning. You may notice that you're sleepy at certain points of the day despite having a sugary drink. And then lastly, you're finding that you're relying heavily on caffeine and yet you're still having daytime sleepiness. So these are some of the things we want to pay attention to. So why should we even care about sleep? Sleep is one of those things that everybody knows, yeah, I should get more sleep. But what ends up happening is we tend to just kind of put it on the back burner, and that's when the trouble really truly begins. So sleep fosters recovery. And the reason why this is important, because it helps to regulate inflammation. This helps our body heal when we get adequate amounts of sleep. It also assists with tissue repair and growth, cell repair, which is very, very important for a lot of our metabolic health and function. It also helps to offset our mental and emotional stresses, right? That's important. Our cardiovascular care, which, blood pressure and aerobic capacity. And finally, our immune balance. So HRV stands for heart rate variability, and this is popular with a lot of our smart devices, our smart watches and things like that. And basically, it's a better measure of your heart health rather than just your resting beats per minute. So if you have adequate amounts of sleep, a lot of these things tend to go away. And what we noticed that we've talked about before in the first two parts, we talked about physical activity, and then we also talked about nutrition. So if we can add a little bit more sleep, then that helps to dovetail with the other two. So my personal stance on sleep is it's the great equalizer. The more sleep that you can get, the better all of those other facets improve. So if you're someone who's getting extra sleep and they're paying attention to their nutrition, the weight comes off easier. If you're someone who's added additional sleep to their lifestyle and their routine, and they're doing physical activity, they're strengthening their muscles and things like that, then they notice that they get faster results and they get injured less often. So the third part here is also what I believe one of the more important ones, but is also one of the most often overlooked. So we're going to hit sleep a little bit harder in the next few slides. Okay, so this is a buzzword that I've heard a few times, and I'm not sure who to quote, so I just kind of listed it in bold. So society has deprioritized sleep, and we've been operating below baseline for many, many years. So there is no truth in, oh, I can catch up on my sleep. It really doesn't work that way. What you have to do is you have to slowly increment sleep back into your routine so that your body can start to reacclimate. So I believe that we're currently in a sleep epidemic, right? About 50% of the population struggles with sleep, and that happens to me from time to time. One of the sources that I found, they say about 8 in 10 adults, about 80% struggle with sleep at least one night per week. And then 3 out of 10 admit to using a sleep aid, whether that be a sleep medication or any sort of alcohol. So sleep issues are typically behavioral, right? Nobody's holding a gun to your head and saying, hey, I need you to stay up till midnight. There's typically a reason why we stay up late, and the downside is for most of us, we have regimented work schedules. So if you always know you have to wake up at 6 a.m. for work, staying up till 1 in the morning to watch Netflix isn't really the best use of your time. So we have to reprioritize our behavior, and when we change our behavior, that helps the body. So like I mentioned in the previous slide, sleep is just as important as exercise as well as nutrition. So most of us don't pay attention to exercise, most of us don't pay attention to nutrition, so why the heck would we pay attention to sleep? So that's why the whole point of this presentation is to kind of help you address all of those three. So we mentioned before that sleep influences every goal of the wellness wheel, which is found at the beginning of this presentation. So get more sleep, everything else falls into place. So we talked about having a positive influence over nutrition and physical activity. So what that means, bottom line for you, is less pain, more energy, and weight loss. That's all great stuff. So when we deal with our emotions in sleep, like I mentioned previously, a lot of our sleep issues revolve around the behavior. So if we have negative thoughts and emotions, that transfers into negative thoughts and behavior, and that spiral continues, and then it becomes cognitive problems and things like that. So what we want to do is we want to offset sleeping poorly at night. We want to offset the fact that we feel fatigued and stressed during our day, and as the day goes on, those feelings compensate and they get worse and worse and worse. We typically self-medicate, whether that's through food or alcohol, and then finally these habits affect the ability to fall asleep or stay asleep the next time. So the wheel on the right, 1, 2, 3, and 4, we see that we're kind of feeding into this bad motor pattern. So one of the things that I mentioned to my patients in my chiropractic clinic is what we want to do is we want to replace thoughts, patterns, and behaviors with improved thoughts, patterns, and behaviors. And we always start with the easiest one. So the basic context for sleep and why it's important is we need to create sleep principles. And sleep principles start with habits, patterns, and behaviors that we're looking to change. And these are what I consider non-negotiables. What we want to do is we want to create foundations where you preserve your sleep and you say, you know what, I could watch another episode of Netflix, but I really need to get that extra hour of sleep. So you need to turn these into non-negotiables. By doing that, you're going to optimize your sleep, which is going to optimize your recovery. When you have optimized recovery, it's going to allow your body to adapt, and through that adaptation, that's tissue adaptation, that's cognitive adaptation, that's pain adaptation, that's your metabolism, and that's when you're going to get the results on the outcome. So these are the individuals that by getting more sleep, they find they have more energy, they're less tired, they're more productive at work, they're in less pain, and when they are in pain, they're able to recover faster, they're less heavily reliant upon caffeine and sleep aids, and then they just have a global improvement. So let's get more sleep, everybody. Some sleep tips. So what we're looking at is what is the bedroom for and what is your bedroom not for. So typically the bedroom should be for only two things. It's for reproductive purposes and it's for sleep. That's it. Period. The end. What the bedroom is not for is eating in your bed, watching television in your bed, worrying about life's problems in your bed, or reading in bed. Now I put this last one with a caveat because you can use it as a sleep aid. So try to keep reading to a minimum of 10 to 15 minutes and always do it under low light. What we're looking at is as humans, our bodies are related to the sun. So when the sun starts to go down, we naturally start to get sleepy because the melatonin in our body starts to react, and then your body says, okay, it's time to shut this tractor down. So what we want to do is if we're going to be using reading, we want to have that low light. And by doing that, we want to limit our light exposure prior to sleep as well. So that's the next point. So for women, I actually read a study that talked about women taking their makeup about an hour off before bed. And the reason why they suggested this, as opposed to doing it right before you go to bed, is because the mirror that you have in your bathroom is usually bright light, right? You want to put the makeup on, those nice fine details, and there's usually not a dimmer switch in the bathroom. So by taking all that time to prepare for bed, you're exposing yourself to all of that light, and that's going to offset your sleep. So try to get your bathroom habits done before an hour before bed, and that's going to help to offset that light intake. This also goes true with television as well as our phones. We know that we're addicted to our technology at this point. You know, that's pretty much, the way that life seems to be going right now. So if you can minimize roughly an hour before bed, reducing televisions, reducing TV, reducing phones, all that sort of stuff, it's going to help to offset your body, your circadian rhythm, and your body's going to feel more primed and ready for sleep. And what that translates into is when your head hits the pillow, you're going to fall asleep faster, as opposed to someone who just turned off the television, then went and laid down. That person's going to be awake a lot longer. So that person might say, oh, I got 8 hours of sleep. They really only got 7 hours of sleep because they were tossing and turning for that first hour to get to bed. So that's something to pay attention to. It's really, really important. Also, you want to make sure that you're winding down. You don't want to start a new project before you're getting ready to bed. You don't want to start balancing your taxes. You don't want to start worrying about tomorrow's troubles. You don't want to start arguing with a neighbor or your spouse or your kids or your cat or your dog. You want to make sure that you're practicing winding down as well as mindfulness. And finally, we're looking at temperature. So typically the research shows that cooler is better, right? So some people like to sleep with the window open, provided there's no ambient outside noise. Some people like to drop the temperature of the room down, and there's also mattresses that address the cooling issue as well. You also want to make sure that you're wearing loose, comfortable clothing. Some people like to sleep in the raw, and if that's your thing, great. But just make sure that you're sleeping in your most comfortable body or the clothing that you're wearing. Okay, this is the last and final slide of the show. I know you guys have been patient with me. We're closing in on 40 minutes. Sleep continued. You want to avoid late night exercising unless that's the only time of day that you can get it. And you also want to avoid caffeine and sugar later in the day, because what that does is that primes your body and it makes you more alert. So in terms of your fight or flight symptoms and your rest and digest, you want to make sure that you're resting and digesting as opposed to exercising or caffeine. You also want to make sure that you're planning your meals to coincide with sleep. Like I mentioned before, we as humans eat every 3 to 4 hours. So if you know that you eat early in the day in terms of your dinner, but you tend to stay up late, you have to plan for a snack if you know it's going to happen anyway, and always choose a vegetable or some fruit, and just make sure that you're not reaching for anything that's going to tempt you, because at the end of the day, our willpower is super, super low, and you want to make sure that you're making smart choices and you're not sabotaging your nutrition investments and your health investments and things like that. And then finally, what we want to do is we want to reframe our concept of sleeping as an investment in your health. Like I mentioned before, it is this issue where we are deprioritizing sleep and we're suboptimal for years, not just a couple of sleepless nights. So you really want to take sleep seriously. It aids with improved cognition, which translates into better decision-making power at work. Helps with hormone balance and regulation, so testosterone and estrogen. We know women with menopause and men with what's called andropause. So we're starting to see men start to lose their muscle mass and they start to get a little bit flabby despite going to the gym and eating clean. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to that in terms of our sleep with hormone balance. And then lastly and finally, optimizing our recovery, maintaining our muscle mass and reducing our fat gain. So I want to thank you all for paying attention to this presentation. I hope you gained a lot of information. The beauty about this slide is it's replayable whenever you like. So go ahead and rewind to your favorite section if you need to have a refresher. Thanks so much and enjoy.